Yechi named.
Can you move your chair to the right a little bit? Josh,
Huh?
can you move your chair to the right a little bit?
To the right. Okay.
Good chair.
Did bar dig it again? Pitch it dig it, what?
Good morning, Gen Rinpoche. Tashi Lele.
Oh, yeah, just yeah.
And good morning, Katrina. Thank you for your translation. In the chat box, you'll find the link to the prayers. We'll begin with some motivations.
To the teacher endowed, transcendent destroyer, one thus found, fully destroyer, completely and fully awakened one, perfect in knowledge and good conduct, one God to bliss, nor the world's supreme guide of beings to be tamed. Teacher of gods and humans to you, Buddha endowed, transcendent destroyer, glorious conqueror, Shakyamuni, I prostrate, make offerings and go for refuge. When I was supreme among humans, you were born on this earth, you pay 7 strides and said I am supreme in this world. To you who are wise, then I bow. With pure bodies, forms supremely fine, wisdom ocean like a golden mountain. Fame that blazes in the 3 worlds, winner the best, supreme guide, to you I bow. With the supreme science, face like the spotless moon, color like gold, to you I bow. You are immaculate, the 3 worlds are not incomparable, wise one, to you I bow. Great, compassionate, protector, all-knowing teacher, field of merit and good qualities, vast as an ocean, the Tathagata I bow. Through purity, freeing from attachment, through virtue, freeing from the lower realms. Unique, supreme, ultimate reality, to the Dharma that is peace I bow. Having freed themselves, showing the path to freedom too, well established in the trainings. The holy field endowed with good qualities, to the Sangha I bow. Do not commit any non-virtuous actions, perform only perfect virtuous actions. Subdue your mind completely, this is the teaching of the Buddha. A star, a mirage, a flame of a lamp, an illusion, a drop of dew, a bubble. A dream, a flash of lightning, a cloud, see conditioned things as such. Through this merit may sentient beings attain the state of all-seeing, subdue the four faults, and be delivered from the ocean of cyclic existence perturbed by the waves of aging, sickness, and death. This ground anointed with perfume, flowers strewn Mount Meru, foreland, sun and moon, imagined as a Buddha land and offered to you. May all beings enjoy this pure land. Venerable holy gurus, in the space of your truth body, from billowing clouds of your wisdom and love, let fall the rain of the profound and extensive Dharma, in whatever form is suitable for subduing sentient beings. Idam gururam namanalakam niriyatayami. I take refuge until I have awakened in the Buddhas, the Dharma, and the Sangha. By the merit I create, by listening to the Dharma, I will attain Buddhahood in order to benefit all sentient beings. I take refuge until I have awakened in the Buddhas, the Dharma, and the Sangha. By the merit I create, by listening to the Dharma, I will attain Buddhahood in order to benefit all sentient beings. I take refuge until I have awakened in the Buddhas, the Dharma, and the Sangha. By the merit I create, by listening to the Dharma, I will attain Buddhahood in order to benefit all sentient beings.
Oh, yeah, Greece. Oh, yeah, don't it go, sir? Geshe chimbu shiwale sungle ra, junjule. Tenjun dine nyebar shinduka, kibu tundu tobar kyubala. Kedan dila pemba matuna, shindi yanda joba kala yur, she sung bataro. Tenjun dine nyebar shindu. Ngara zum militi, chimbu shibuchi nyeko, shibuchi toyoras, di yang siyan su tensu tangu yora. Di mesi di taas, chindi chibu tundaris ke yin samtenane, chindi chibu tundal matun goko tegra, di chibu goko tegra. Di tundalya. Tenjun dine nyebar shindu kaas. Ya tewe tende shin no le la serva. Rawa shendele chik. Seku nemele sobo kanga. Tele so atamna kanga jurgu yuna ya. Te tabi shin na bum bum du le ya susu. Mese de lakbare sungudwa. Tiye ndi ti. Tewe tende shin la le la. Tede shu. Tenjun dine nyebar shindu. Kibi tendu toba kyoba las. Tanda mili tobe de chende chiku dondarwa tan tu nye kyong. Ani saya tuwara chik chadiro che taga tso chuba ina sungwara. Ani shira pangboras ti tandu dan keba chira ma chungras. Tandu tso kuran tso saya tsangda tso sayo kar chena chi. Tende kungda shken dugwara. Chima penche samlo ke yo mara. Ti na shin tandu dan keba ma chungras. Ti hindi. Dewa dende shin lulan denda mara. Tanju dende nyebar shin duwa. Kibi tandu toba kibalas. Sindi chikbu tundal mezi di tso machigu sungwara. Kiwa chima penjali ya. Eni tanda mabu tuwe wara. Yun ringbu di kiwa chima penjali ta ringa ese. Di indi zan chima penjali tundal samlu tangu ese. Kibi tundu taba kibalas. Yo le te shilamna. Maungdang ya.
So here, as the Master Shantideva has said, so hard to find the freedom and endowments whereby the aims of beings may be gained. If I now fail to turn it to my profit, how could such a chance be mine again? So here, we really need to remind ourselves again and again of just how precious this life is that we have right now. If we just allow ourselves to expend our time on the affairs of just this life, that is something that is such a great loss. If we don't think about how precious it is, we are likely to squander it in the activities of just this life. And so here, our life that we have is something that is really more precious than a wish-fulfilling jewel. With a wish-fulfilling jewel, you can request whatever sort of worldly things, food and clothing and necessities you might need. But the kind of life that we have is more precious even than hundreds of thousands of those wish-fulfilling jewels. And so we shouldn't use this life that we have just for the affairs of this life, like to destroy our enemies, to protect our friends, to get the things that we want, food and clothing and so forth. But rather, we have the ability to think about our future lives, whereby the aims of beings may be gained. We can think about the fact that this life is quite short in comparison to our future lives, which are much longer. And so we shouldn't use the life that we have just for the kind of affairs of this life, but rather think about benefiting ourselves in the much longer future that lays ahead.
Roya. Tende kibi tundu toba kibalas. Se dile ko chima penje ki tanda kiwa mambu kiwa ne kiwa kyuti ringbu chi te sonza. Ko kyuma shebishe taadi te de yorno, kyunti te de yora. Tende ko titi tsendi pa yun tundu rish, tene tsendi yun tundu rish ra. Kyusi toba tago yambe so rish, tende roya reba. Tende ko chima penje de yor ringbu rish. Titi tanda samlu tangu rish ngora. Tsendi la tewa, chima penje ki tanda ruya nigal samlu tangu rish ngora. Titi tanda karis na kibi tundu toba kiwa. Tinga tsu tanda kibu chungu ringi chenpo sheche sum sheke wara namji. Ti kati ina pi ke chenpo che sheke wara kibu sumdi. Tangpo tila ko kiwa chenpa nga suna ma dunga che, nyawa yada tundu tuzu tunga samlu tang, tila ma jiba che. Ina lada mi che zhube ten tanda na she ten kebar sheche toba sheke yin sam. Ti tanda di chugu wara. Chenpa nga suna dunga ma dunga, lada mi ten kebar sheche toba, ti tanda sheke ra. Ti tandaliya, ti gyudi tukku wara, gyudi tukku wara. Lingwa yesumji kone shela tsewe risu kyuba di pang. Lunga Yesum Jikone, Shangi Sokyovala Sokwa, or Tende, Shala Pemba Troop Chiniche, or teachable tene, tea, Gutilla tene, Kiwachimanga Songi Tumeka, Lada Milita or Ketuguara, or the Indico, give it on that tongue, but the shit to Canada. Give would drink the chimbo the Kange Shidira. Give chimbo Yanlara, give chimbo and decor a thing on a decor a city, Yala Shigura. So the Kabu Chimbolia tree at today in Barwa. Yeah, teach you.
So here, as it says, this life that we have right now can be used for the aims of beings, really thinking about our future lives. We are going to continue taking lifetime after lifetime, and this continuity goes on even beyond just this life. And so what we have right now is really so short. It's sort of like a flash and then it is gone, whereas the future is a much longer period of time. So we should think not only about this life, but think about the happiness of this life and benefit for our future lives. And this is taught generally in the teachings for the beings of small, middling, and great scope. But it is important to take the teachings for the being of small scope as a foundation. This is to ensure that we don't fall into the lower realms and the hell realms or as a hungry ghost or as an animal, but rather ensure that we get a good rebirth as a human or a god. And in order to secure that, we need to accumulate the causes that lead to such a birth, which is really abandoning any sort of harmful actions and the basis for that, killing and so forth, and engaging in those activities that are beneficial to others, protecting life. And it is then this path of the being of small scope that is the foundation for the kinds of trainings of the being of middling and great scope. So we're often teaching these teachings that have to do with the great scope, but really we need to have as a sort of branch, as a foundation for all of that, the teachings of the being of small scope, of ensuring that we gain a good rebirth in the future by making sure that we accumulate the causes, abandoning any kind of harm, and benefiting others as much as we are able to.
Oh, yeah, Privatsendelia Castle, Lunga Yesum Yukone, Shella Tawa, make you a choose Sivan Namjinato, make you a Chukone, Shella Tawa, young Mayudita to Shekuara. And it is so Jebala sober, so Jobala sober, Doctor Kewachu to Chukuara. The Tonjo Church, Tiletama shaking to someone around to the Tama, Tadwachi, Chumja, Tiletora Shechimado, the Namichen, Tonjo Chele, Yagachimudua. Namju Geshe di Sen Yongudu, Tama Yongudu, Situ Yongudu, Tita Gora, Tita Kabura, Ni Lady Chona Kona Socha Yongudu, Machimba Yongudu, Lami Yongudu, Ra, so much lawyer. Ye gonna nafsim, me till in the Bachambuchia, Chala, nor Chala. Nursing never gave some Yongudu, there were Tatos and the Milia Chicho Santa. Nafsim, no loader, let you de me, says some little Madonna. Some little tower member man, and imagine legend remember the Chibar collected city order. Okay, some change you to Tashan. Let them mess kettling on Marius Kelly got the lender Simitagra. Or in the tea, Tonacha Ramadangarazzi, Lane Yagashira, Titunjura Shipsi. She went at the Tira. Tea she tempered sooner. Jamba the Sewa Shitsugiora. Shall at Sawa point, oh, never changing more, a mill never something. Sewa de Gudo Chamba. So Jobala so Pendo Chevy in the military was a Chamba de Gudo. Chamsi Shisungura. Shall it so up on what Pembaniti Shisungura. Tia Yar, none any Sanjay Kumba the Tierra. Tunga Tamje Pemba never Tamje the Java. There were Tamje and Demba, I did right and then give would drink the Kibu Chimbo to some of the Cobra. Sanko Shitty. Tia Bush some time nearing it in Mechinalia. And it gave a Toman Bevanessa, I should be was such a Bashir. There's about some shabache. Oh, Dini watches and look at a chosen and it's Chimando said it out that 10 Kissara. A tea in a coit tinete yard Chasser. Tea man and it under a win a Chimatalo Yama. Yamando Senor that and also Madre Yankayada. Ya teach children.
So here, therefore, in this life, we really need to pay attention to what we are doing with our body, speech, and mind. We need to investigate this and really look at, am I harming others with my body, speech, and mind, or am I benefiting them? Often we look at this as being like unimportant, and we think, well, I want to jump to the higher stuff. I don't really want to think about those lower paths. And so we don't think about what we are doing with our body. We might engage in killing or in other stealing, taking what's not given, and so forth. Or as we're speaking, we are being, we're engaging in harsh speech, divisive speech. We're lying to others, and we don't really think about that. And so we need to pay attention to our activities of body, speech, and mind. Do I have a feeling of being jealous of others, of coveting the things that they have? Do I have a feeling of wanting to harm other sentient beings? Am I actually paying attention to karma, or am I sort of disregarding that, like, oh yeah, cause and effect, but not actually holding to the view that the actions that I engage in will have consequences? And so often we see this as being sort of unimportant, like, oh, that's just for the being of small scope. But this is really the foundation for everything that comes later. It is this foundation of abandoning harm and benefiting others that lays the foundation for developing love and compassion. When we avoid any sort of activities that are harmful to others, this is how we develop compassion. We are actually engaging in a way that doesn't create harm for others. We should be thinking, if I do this, is it going to hurt others? Or if I do this, is it going to benefit others? And so that kind of foundation for our love and compassion is so important, and really holding to that as something that is important is something that we do in our day-to-day life. We need to pay attention to our actions and also recognize that in previous lives we have accumulated all kinds of heinous, non-virtuous actions, and really take the time to purify, to engage in confession so as to purify those kinds of activities. And if we hold to these kinds of practices, then we can ensure that we will have a good rebirth. It will be certain that we are able to ensure that. However, if we disregard this and fall into the lower realms, then really what can we do from there?
Oh yeah. Teni ta tele labe tonda niba de kibun drengi tonda dera. Tati ya wora ji ten he sona. Rwa. Oh te kyo chimo da la da me da chetu be ten shi le kyo ye samolam kyo kyutu sa ji te ora. Oh tati ne kyo chimo la da me le ke na te kya nya lo chme ke me wasam. Mile tunge yo wasam lale tunge yo rasam. Kika na chi tunge me ge ji wa maranga to mile tunge yo ba de a ko go rwa. Kika na chi le so ba te kyo thoma me ba na ko ko mandro ya ando ka to kyo sam bu di malan cha me esere. Tuga chi na dil ma chi cha me sa na si nya wa ten tunge ma bu nyo chi kyo la de yo da. O ti ndu ka su re. Ko le ten du to chi ma se na. Le da nyomo be shwa du chu ni phung bu do le che me go chi. Ki chi che me go. Tarwachi, kuwe tunga dili tarwachi. Kura korsa ten ruwa ruwa tu tirwa, nyawa ida tunru mi la lama ila sawa. O le dan nyamu ba shiwa di kyuni tezuli kema kuya chi. Ruwa. O dili tarwachi che kuya sam. Ani kibu dringi samlu tu kuya kuya ra. O di kosna te di tunda ala karchi kuya sana. Ani konto nga je chato ala saba nyamu pang kuya ra. So de, ta chuna, tongpa nyi da tinte samlu tangi kuya ra tangpu taga. Oh, nga samsang nga ji ta me ba samlo ta. Ane nga yi samsang shenja kesa to zo la pa yi to hunga da nga yi wa rawa to me ba ser. Ane tra to zo se. So se tra che to zo. Rawa to tube tra yi ba shi. Tinde me ba so samlo yo ge. Pa ta ni sha ge ba tinde samlo ta ni. Ta tongpa ni da me da ba chamu ta. To zo samlo ta go ra. Chagdang yo zo nyamu zo se go ra. Kwa ge je gyude nyamu ro ba. Chagdang ni de. 디나네 당부 착바데 달라 착바 다길 착 착바 요선 당와데 용구라 착바 맨날 당와 용서 요 말아 뭐 디인데 그 착바라서 봐라 되네 공동가 제 차도 전심라서 보다 너무 고라리아 견도 대시 뜻을 니린니리 매지나 초로 따야 근데 좀에 동반이 공이야 야로 진짜 전에 기분 드링기 남드네 너무 세네 nyamu be wangi le saya de mebe chasuna ne yang yang nyamu sebe ne ko keba seba de ko le batu yo mara ene ke ola yo mara nyamu sa sha ge le ma bu yo na te le te so ko kepsan tembe seben ma chuma do karso gura ko debu me yo mara Penant Sabin the Chineco, Sakampuchil Shashanaco, Debumia Yomara, Tele Sebas, the Chulu Nation Chinchera, Tico never so gets many I Kigmara, or Tindungar Sabele Karina Tezukangala, a certain gay. Sabelia Chuda Lu Tezugia, give us so a tination mare, Sebat Mana, said that tell a young Simechera, give us Seba the Kuval and Bachil Shinchanti Omare, O Tanga Mebede, Tanga Yang Jachi, Chile Guyu, Samsung, Samluti Omara, message didn't tell a Sebate, Sierra, that and do some Yogu, some such. That and that she told you, Saya to Yemen, some. Kubalembas is a question or Tion any quite Yako Luguara. Or Tiandico, Seba de Conchu, Yiringiri Mechina Condunga, Yetrado, Kajina, Mezidike to Dalco, Sayako, Toyako, to the Cora, Timana Church, the Sam Pajera, Alecura, some comas at Tegra. Ticore de Timezidike, Chakin, some mother. He would just also done Remi 나중에 집배치하는 시기라 슈글에 놈 티바나 시체제 인소 가가서야 매버리 그까지 나타티 상배 냠도 살소서 셈비날 파츠 소소다 차르요라 나요가 있어 냠도 진데 그 코티 매버리스코라 메시케 돈달레 튕기 차기 대사 거라서 거라 티 트라좀 베나티 너 디사고르 땡아 추통고 지지치고서 티 용그라 티 세바케 세마레 너 Mezike and the Koshagi Kutan and Sobo, Santelia, Seba Sigmara, oh, teacher Lamia.
So here, going beyond the thoughts of, oh, well, my future rebirth, I need to ensure through creating the proper causes, making prayers to be born as a human and a god, and to avoid a rebirth in the lower realms. When you come to see that, well, that itself is not satisfying, actually, because even if we are born as a human or a god, we're subject to all of these different kinds of sufferings, the sufferings of birth, aging, sickness, and death, the suffering of being under the control of our karma and afflictions and uncontrollably taking up and casting off various aggregates. And so here, going beyond that kind of thought of just ensuring a future rebirth, we think, well, I don't want to have to continue to cycle through these 6 realms, taking up and casting off aggregates due to the force of my karma and afflictions. And so the thought of emptiness arises, of thinking how it is that this our afflictions, and particularly this thought of I, this kind of autonomous I, and then thinking about the mine and having attachment to our own side and aversion or animosity toward the other. It is really this kind of recognition that this is the root of samsara, and then developing the antidote to that by recognizing that these people that we hold, or these things that we hold as being on my side, as autonomously are existing. And so too, the things that we have animosity toward, we think of our enemy as somehow being our enemy from their own side, without recognizing the way in which that is mentally designated as such. And so when we see that the cause of repeated rebirth within samsara is our afflictions, we make an effort to eliminate those afflictions, to get rid of our attachment and our animosity, our jealousy, our competitiveness, our pride, and meditate on emptiness and impermanence and so forth. If we are able to extinguish the kind of craving, extinguish our ignorance and craving, then there will be no future rebirths, no matter how many karmas we have accumulated in the past. So even if we have many karmas that are sort of stored up, by getting rid of the thing that fosters, that nurtures those karmas into future existence, it's sort of like having seeds that are just in a dry spot. They are never going to ripen into an actual sprout. And so too, our karmas won't ripen if we are able to eliminate the craving that nurtures them into future existence. And so, as it is said, when we have that kind of freedom from craving, there will be no future rebirths. So even if within this life we make an effort to get rid of that kind of craving and ignorance, we will be able to eliminate those future rebirths without getting rid of every single karma that we have accumulated. And so here, yes, we have to have enough, right? We have to be able to sustain ourselves and have the kind of proper conditions for existence. But it is important that we don't have this sort of craving for this and this attachment to them. Once we start having attachment, it's like oil put on paper. It sort of permeates and is really difficult to get rid of. And so even someone like an arhat needs basic conditions. They need to have water and food and so forth. But having gotten rid of the thought that craves after those things, that is really what will eliminate the potential for taking future rebirths.
Oh yeah. Oh, they call me Judera. Koya Dongele Tandu Loshu Shambur Shikewalia. Kiwa Toma Mebanesia. Toma Kanga Samlata. Mahaba Yonjude Samlata. Sosu de Tande. Mesin de Chiburi Samlata Jumedoa. Chitanda Metabare ko Jurgu Jugushi. Kiwa Damada Pumbu Damada Lensetan Duyora. Oh, Tinako. Kiwa Toma Mebane. Nyawa Yeta Tandu Tungetu Nyaya Sam. Tezudo Samlata. Tele Kene Tende. Di Manu Tungan di Manu Samero. Tanda Sambanashimaro, Tabata Kawaki, Samsari Siwate. Within the Tazama Samuta, Toma Vivane, Tindena, Tataret and Mirashi, Agitan, she left the ora. The Mambala to say, given the gave a plate there, something sometime when they sit tired, Tarachek was a some Kuda. To me, the awards sometime, Memane Karikarinya. Tanda dinner, she said, Tanda Miridation, Kawaka, and the conscience of Tisamutana, and Mambala, Tanda to sit there. Karimiliki, Yatanduchi, Yalchi, Yalang, and Basagasi, Marchi to stand. The judge somebody Samutana, and so, oh, so, Tawada to make the Kashurish to the Sentichibu membership. Oh, anyone the Mamba, Kaburism, Tereshinichi, and Batu some Kosira. Any angel say, one a Tarbat with some service. Some Giranga to send the social Kangachi, Kangi the Mab so good scientific Chido. Kangela Kangi to Matsona, Goko de could do in a Tara some dana. Generally, Gendo Hamagone, the Gendus locate Igmara. Some Madana, the Samutana, and it is Shukshimbo, Tumele Muneta, she would do some. That in a genius, so the Pama to the some. Send this Susu to carry in associations and a part of Mata Yed and Yedu, put on Pomochuma, some Kangal, some Tangiora. Mata case issues of the Nabungas of Mata Chiches, some Tangiora. Oh, Tidukasura. Oh, today some Tane. And it's also Kagam Maiba. So the Pama Cube subject to someone. Sidichi Pama member. Joanne Joan among Amana Pada Mother, you were sending a shingy permanent dinner, she was simply so much. Depend on your depend on must do Sake Mara. Oh, Tinderesha, so listen, get Tamje said. Some subject Tamje to me the Chaku to Sarachi Puchin, but do some Kibu Chimbu Sam to Corto. What he loves you.
So here, generating renunciation, this strong wish to be freed from this cycle of repeated rebirth is really brought about by thinking about our past lives and our future lives, not just thinking about and being focused on this life, but really expanding the scope of our understanding of our suffering and happiness, thinking about how we have taken countless rebirths in the past and experienced all myriad forms of suffering, right? There's probably not a single type of suffering that we haven't experienced in the past. And so too, we will continue to take rebirths in the future. And so given that we have taken birth since beginningless time, we need to recognize that right now, although we are human, it's not certain where we will go again in the future. This life is but a moment, really. And our time that we have experienced suffering in the past and the kind of time that will come in the future is much more expansive. And so widening the scope of our sense of our happiness and suffering, then we can really give rise to a sense of renunciation, of thinking, I want to get out of this cycle of suffering. This is something that is important to contemplate, because unless we really recognize our situation as one of suffering, we won't have the wish to be freed from that, right? If we don't recognize the experience that we are in as being suffering, the desire to get out of that doesn't arise. We can be in a situation that really we should look at as being suffering, but we won't have a wish to be freed from that unless we recognize it for what it is. And so here it is something that would generate this feeling of renunciation is dependent upon our widening the scope of our understanding of our suffering experience. And this then extends when we think about other sentient beings. It's not just me who is in this situation of samsara, but rather all of my mother's fathers, the beings that I cherish and love, my friends, my family, my children, all of my relatives and so forth. And generally the mother is seen as being most important, but we recognize that all of them are in this same situation. And there's not a single being with whom we have not had this kind of closeness, given that we have taken countless previous lives in the past. And so wishing to be able to free all sentient beings from suffering, not just thinking about oneself and seeing the kind of defects of that, we give rise to this feeling of, may I be able to free all sentient beings who have acted towards me with great kindness, towards whom I have had close relationships, and give rise to this kind of attitude of the being of great scope.
근데 삼르단 참아 파다 말라서 보니니도 소버와 라라 람땡게라 소버 알와 기게라 소버 텐데 lokten chenke dap tende ma ju simje che me so so kare ka ne tine shi changma ju de yo re sam o tende changma ka de chimbo re sam je e te changma ka de chimbo de yu sha ne so so chibu sam ta na ma de re sam ro e te zo ya changma ya chi ta ye tab shi chibu do sam te tar tanda so so ne ba yo ma re ta ya bu chi so so ya ro tan che 그런데 참만 봐 세계 연대의 시행의 가치를 상으로 단단해 심지어는 신변 주의 가치를 치르다 요 근데 전에 탈심በት 제고요섬 네가 용수 쪽에 거는 심지어는 된다 죽통 게시 제고요섬 대체도 상계 고바 도구라 그것이 연대 군대에 강사질은 주와 제고도 섬제 아니 상계지 고바 통되고 놓기거라 야 전주고 심시거라 This samlatayalita namjunga to teach young Geshe, Mashi Tende, so young Chamba Chudemanga Tujikone. The Castle George upon the audition of Marcuni, Mashi Tende Chudemanga Tundi, Yamlichi to Sungudoa. So cutting Chimba, Sendi Pamas of cutting Shisha Karina. Tina she someone you day or there some kitchen pen and one machine, Madame, one day and the river, some coach of Godoa. 근데 삼다 센텔이야. 되니까 그래. 근데 초진에 뒤삼다 알 거리 전부 연바득. 참아. 개발시에서도 삼 기집애는 거 마신 분마다 삼사체. 초진에 되네 계세 전부 쉬어라고 숨분하시. 당신 냠지셔야 되로. 거기 전부 전에 삼다. 뒤먹어 전에 지단에. 소소 대원들 동에 매듭에 소화시오라. 다다 현도 냠반에 담분이도 배대 검수도. 소소 라 대원들 동에 매듭에 소화 숙심부 쉬어라. 지나시 정말 요랑 알아서 소소 동에데 데데 백해심부 대화토에데 개심부 소소데 동에들 대화 매듭에 저저 소에 삼로데 김부시부 쉬어라 숙심부 요라. 강에 맞춘다서 야부 주나서 가리나. 주로 정말 공개에 대화가 매듭에 추주시네 매나 섬서 챙기도. 지나시 소화지 연계 러와 연계 로 대다부 소냠선 요대가 정말이야 삼사 뒤섬도 당겨와라 다 대원들의 신 동에 meditation도 신 소소내신 소화되어서 아주 단다가래 소소 소화된데 이러신데 사도선도 신 사다도서 그렇지 봐도 나와서 그 거거를 가리는 것이 말게 맞다 가서 저렇게 매섬선을 챙도 어때인데 가서라 어떤데 삼을 담고 요라 근데 삼단에는 지 동해이나 처음에 동해에 세고도 와서 소선대바 예바 19급 중에서는 새로 제고도 와서 템퍼처러 제고도 와서 삼물도 숙심불래도 와 다시 다다 셴도 냠바네 탐이베 대다 동에 냠바나 탐제 다시 소자 매 동에가 매고예 대화 간거 톱고 셴달이나 매매는 매스네 말아오르지라 소소 파마다니들 사회 상마티 수이네라 어디도 가서라 생기 동에데 소소네 생기 소아요래 코티 맨드나 삼별 텔 로바 제고야래 도와 삼사이 삼고요라 대화를 지내 소소 대화나 시리 두고체네고 소소 그가 위원회 때 두로 제고도 삼들 삼고요라 어디에네 가서라 다다 신도냐면 담보인베라 대다 동해냐면은 탐제 다시 송어샤세 소소네 시삼다 로 ene kyo tangyo kyo samlo tangyo rachi je rede chikba rede soso ke chishu se de ro asam thoma mebane soso ke chishu se de ta soso ke chishu se ne ta ju soso ke chishu se ne yabu je re ne sangye so ke 동해 nyom mo go yabu je re ne de de ra ti re me do ase go ra soso ke chishu se ba de ke kanga tene yong go do ase ane nga ji ne shanda se ne soso dandal shal chawa che de kanga yong go ra 어디 되잖고 라니 진지데 그거 정말 고려샤섬 다 삼로 거랑 제보당 것도 삼보라 병원에 지동에 매부시대 대화 탐제 대보 소소 제고요나 다 삼로 단단 거랑 통만 매번 삼로 단단 거랑 드림도 다들 제보자고도 삼보라 가르 제보자고도 다다 신이 제보자고도 살아 다다 신 제보자서 다 신이 다 제대 요마라 토마 메바나 나 삼라 게시슈제 라치슈제 섭들라 다 심진 탐비에 게시슈제 고야레 샤섬 로 소소 게춘주제 샤섬 토마 메바나 심진 신 야와도 뒤던도 삼마다나 시라파 게충을지 신 게시슈 다시 냠지세 다시 지와세데 삼도 토마 메바나 예병아 라치지 라게시슈제 삼르 섭디 신 게시슈제 샤 토마메만에 셴 야와도 또는 메시 샤야서데 셴게 된다고 써서 가리네 가서래 개춘주지 근데 다 진짜 셴 진짜게 다 진짜 셴 야와도 로지 잡잡셔라 라 토마메만에 셴반데 셴 셴반데 셴 토마메만 남일 당나 소소 뒤던달이야 셴들 죽고네 소소 개시와 마지 퍼져 개시와지 진짜 삼부다지다 고 뒤지 연계 절대죠 야부 삼부다 디셈을 샤오라 아주 베젠나세 상마데 제금라 신에도 주는 셈치지버 주고는 조금씩 남도 간거 바까오라 따단데도 삼을 마보다고라 마도 제바잖아 오늘에 대해 교생가에서 되는 오늘에 샤섬서 소송의 신이그라 네 신이서는 되나시 제루라 중기 소리지 단다 근데 시기 어르시 제베네 그 좋아서요 합니다 어디 근데 삼로 당시 된다 기부치빌 남다도 공개에 가시 공개할 때서 남산 셈치지 버리다 우주물이 공개할 시기도 디 겁나도 야보려 신내를 또 셈때문에 치나 아니 니주 자세야 도망다 주소 또 지샤
Kenla forgot the translator for a minute, right? So
No,
yeah. So thinking in this way that all sentient beings have acted as like our mothers, our fathers, our teachers, the ones who showed us the path and so forth, and that they have all been greatly kind to us, other than not recognizing that due to the fact that we have changed lives, to ignore them, to just disregard these other sentient beings who have shown us such great kindness is not suitable, but rather we should work to eliminate their suffering and accomplish their happiness. Now, right now, we don't have that kind of capacity, but making this aspiration to become a being who has eliminated all faults and developed all good qualities, this is the attitude of bodhicitta. And we begin pursuing that through the program of like eliminating each of our faults and developing each of our good qualities in order that we ourselves might become a being who has the capacity to really be of benefit to these other sentient beings. beings based upon recognizing the kindness that they have shown us and our previous connections with them. And so that way of contemplating is the sevenfold cause and effect method that has been passed down to us through Atisha, that is really based upon recognizing the kindness of these other sentient beings. All have shown us such kindness in past lives, and other than our not recognizing it, it's not the case that we are unconnected from them, right? And on the other hand, we have the method of generating bodhicitta that comes through Shantideva, which is not necessarily based upon recognizing their kindness, but really recognizing our equality in terms of first recognizing our equality and then equalizing and exchanging self and other. And so here we ourselves have this strong kind of wish to be happy and not to suffer. This is something that is stable within us, right? Even if we experience a small suffering, we want to get rid of that immediately. And even if it's a small happiness, we want to pursue that. And so too, when we recognize that all other sentient beings are just like that, right? Our own desire to be happy is just the same as every other sentient being, and our desire not to suffer is the same as every other sentient being. Normally, we kind of look at others as being like inanimate, like dirt or stones or something, and we think we're totally unconnected and their happiness and suffering doesn't matter. But rather, once we begin to recognize that in the same way that I want to be happy and not want to suffer, every single other sentient being is exactly the same as me. And it's not right to just think about myself and sort of have this myopic kind of a view, but rather, as Shantideva explains, that because something is suffering, we should want to eliminate that, not just for ourselves, but we should guard against suffering for every other sentient being. And so too, we should want to accomplish the happiness of others just based upon it being happiness that comes to others. And so here, recognizing our equality in that way, we then turn to looking at the faults of our self-cherishing, this attitude that we have had, this kind of self-centeredness where we see ourselves as most important. If it were the case that this kind of attitude brought us to the state of Buddhahood, well then that's fine, we should pursue that. But when we look at it, we can see that we've had this kind of attitude since beginningless time, and it actually has not brought us to anything good. This way of thinking has only led to further suffering. This thought of I and holding this I as most important is something that is very much faulty. It's not giving us good results. And so therefore, we should exchange the kind of attitude. It's not a literal exchange of self and other, but rather exchanging our concern, our self-centeredness for an attitude that cherishes others. In the way that we normally disregard others, sort of don't pay attention to them, we start to feel that towards ourselves and instead cherish other sentient beings, wish for their happiness and so forth. So seeing others as important and coming to cherish them is the way in which we exchange this attitude of our normal self-cherishing attitude for cherishing others and come to sort of disregard ourselves. I mean, we need to think about this really well. This is something that we can't just sort of listen to as being like a story, right? Or something like, oh yeah, this is just how it is. But rather, we need to contemplate it. When we talk about meditation, often this is analytical meditation. It's really thinking through the reasons for something such that we generate an ascertainment. We get certainty with regard to that. We give rise to a feeling about it rather than, again, like hearing a story or something. Often when people talk about meditation, they think that this just means a kind of single-pointed focus, like what we engage in order to develop meditative stabilization or meditative concentration. And while doing something like single-pointedly focusing on the breath is useful for gaining mental stability, the majority of meditations are really about thinking through the reasonings in order to give rise to a feeling within ourselves. And this is particularly the case when it comes to developing bodhicitta, whether it is through the sevenfold cause and effect method or equalizing and exchanging self and others. We really have to contemplate these deeply, engage in this kind of analytical meditation in order to generate a real feeling of those.
Oh yeah, that is. Oh, that did give it and do to about you, Balasera. Oh, that give it and that give it with the near son and make a lot of milky serane, qua cormego tabatoveche. The Rajibu Maiba simply tamject to Sanje Kobato and the sum to Edwa. Oh, there's a time to be innocent. Give it and do to about you. Getting Dilla Pemba Maruna, that I cook up. There was somebody there's a Tomney. de kabli madu ina sura keten de la pem madu na de sosu da de tuba machana chinde anda joba kala jose maum bane de mesen de tabu tabaris tugu mardas yanda wa jo kabu de ese tene nge so de ke sona ni ka ge che omara o te duza o chinde anda joba kala o she sum bataro ane chende chibu tidule chabo mai ba kyo chima peje ge ten chitu tena kibu chungu ta dingda chimbe te remba shin de tune sanje ko se yende kunde je sanje je ko man to war cha asam o te chido ne ngoto dangele tembe shung gombulu du jebe omare je chwa de le to bata samba komba chene de rembye tene sanje je ko man to be chedo to sam ko sum la rembye je wini sam ko no se ta no sembar shoche on this yeah.
So here, as it says in this verse, the aims of beings may be gained based upon this kind of rebirth. And at the lowest level, this is ensuring that we are not born in the lower realms, that we gain a good rebirth as a human or a god. And going beyond that, achieving liberation, getting rid of having to cycle within samsara. And going beyond that is to think about the needs and benefit, the welfare of others, wishing to become a Buddha for the benefit of all sentient beings, and striving for that state. We then are striving for a state in which one has eliminated all faults and developed all good qualities. And as it says here, if I now fail to turn it to my profit, if we don't take advantage of the life that we have now, then how could such a chance be mine again? This kind of birth is not something that we get time after time after time, but rather we need to take advantage of the opportunity that we have, make sure that we don't fall into the lower realms, and not just be attached to the benefits of this life or the kind of affairs of this life, but rather use this in order to be something for a greater kind of a good. And so here I'm thinking about our motivation for listening to this text, the precious Garland, which teaches the stages for attaining higher rebirths and definite goodness. We should think that in order to pursue that, I myself will become a Buddha, a being who has eliminated all faults and developed all good qualities. And in order to do that, I'm going to listen to this text that teaches the various stages for that, in order that I might be able to achieve this for the benefit of all sentient beings. So please set a good motivation for then listening to these teachings.
Yeah, that is done to Tungamit. Oh, that didn't my loss in the Kasere. Oh, yeah. Oh, don't I do that. But subject is the motion. Oh, don't I do that. Kasere. Just can you dimba?
Lare.
Look at just can you throw. Dada Shenla. Dada Shembe. Tarbetan said, Dada Shembe, Tarbetan. Dirisan Kede, Tedani. Paru Chindu, Kona Yu, Teve Dini, Sanjekas. That is Teba Chimbogu, Sundi, teaching in Dotus Kanga, Sanje Karese, Yedu Tingi Nanda Chigi Karsere, Sanje Kamares and the Chiorba, Tutamoshina, Nangbalia. Oh, that is Sanje Kameme to send out of a sheson. Luci Batangura, watch Batangura, Sarah, young maybe get some more shakes some Kyoda. It is simply Tamjas a car to your Tamjas Tentures. Tinny Tagbe Shan Chepachan, social relation out to Dali. Joanna Kawakale Kapkana Tansi, the young maybe some race. Tisanje Kama race or Sanje Soya de. Oh, Tinny Tabashi Sone. Teba Sumga Yandu, Rangeta, Yandu with the Nila Sumbana Shere. Did the language take was simple soya, Omar, Sanje Soya Tare. Take on Balatana, and it was some somebody else, Yandu Tibor and get about teaching Tibala Tire. Come to take on your race. Tatu Tiba some race at it. Tartu was some good Tartu race. Yandu Lamashuna Trachum, Hametona Tarture, Rangeli Shuna Tarture, Sanje Tiba simple Shuna Tartu race. Medates, condition is sort of matter. Come jetty. Nierale lavaci omares, Nieran Jena Tartusa res, o Tendekele gates Damoyora, o Kundupa, Sanje Kamaris and Gomuluda, Tisuba, Sesharamato, Sanjum de Yontes, Sumi, Dusuna, Dembashi song to Satitu Songo, to the song Medosiguara, or this on the teaching the Sanjay song, the Sanjay teaching Dotto Sanjay Kai, but to wear it, or teaching Lamnaldam.
So here then, picking up in the text, and we don't need to read all of the topic headings, but we are on verse 382, which is really establishing that the teachings, the scriptures of the universal vehicle or the Mahayana are the speech of the Buddha. So there are those among the various Buddhist tenant schools who do not accept that the Mahayana scriptures are the teaching of the Buddha. Now here it says, in brief, the teaching of the Buddha includes what benefits oneself and others, and the way to attain liberation. These topics are contained in the 6 perfections, therefore they are also the Buddha's words. So here, there are those who hear the teachings that come from the universal vehicle that say, like, you need to, that bodhisattvas say, offer their own head, offer their body. They pursue the benefit of others, exchanging self and other, and pursue that for countless eons. And some think that, oh, that's not possible. That can't come about. But really, the teachings of the Buddha are as they were presented in the turning of the wheel on the 4 noble truths. And the kind of teachings that go beyond that were something that were just sort of fabricated by Nagarjuna. There are those that assert that there are definitely 3 final vehicles, that one can attain the liberation or the state of an arhat, of a Shravaka, Pratyeka Buddha, and then a Buddha, and one doesn't sort of go beyond that. So there are those that look at the scriptures, the Mahayana scriptures, and think that they are not the teachings of the Buddha. They're not established as the speech of the Buddha. And here we are establishing that, yes, they actually contain the same kinds of teachings, and therefore are established as being the speech of the Buddha.
Oh, yeah. That is teaching Sanjay. Tabachimbe Dotto Sanjay got his to be or that on the Digisholo Dinema or Dada Shella Pembe Tense, Dada Shella Pembe, Dada Shella Pembe Negata, or any target to Dotiba, take a member tenderly soon your esera, Sanjay Tempata, or take what Chimbe Tenelia, and part of the Chimba Trude, take a member dona Sumbale Hagma. Tanda song yore, tezo shish, tezo tsama song yore, tila lakwa song yore, segura. Tada shenpe tarbe ten, dorsan ke ten, tetane, tekwa chimbe dona sanje chumde de song yore, segura. Ane, paru chindu kona yose, tekwa membe dona song shabe, paru de chimba chukba tuzu tsangma, tekwa chimbe dona yore, segura. Tezam chegma, tila lakwa yore, segura. Kona yose, Deyan dine sanje kase, o kona yeba masa tila lakbache sanje son yore, stina le tiba chibita ni kapso. O te son zende sanje kare ese. O tadi yeba malo ne drimer ya. Tada shela, ya ti digre. This one.
So here then again in this verse, this is establishing that what is taught in the universal vehicle is definitely the speech of the Buddha. So again, in brief, the teaching of the Buddha includes what benefits one's self and others and the way to attain liberation. These topics are contained in the 6 perfections, and therefore they are also the Buddha's words. So here, the Buddha's teachings give the kind of the things that benefit oneself and others temporarily, and also that leads to liberation. And those teachings that come from the fundamental vehicle, what is taught within the universal vehicle, the 6 perfections and so forth, contain something above and beyond that. And so here, it's the same sort of message of benefiting oneself and others and leading to liberation. But what is taught within the universal vehicle supersedes that. And so the Buddha's, this then establishes that what is contained there, the teachings of the 6 perfections and so forth, are also definitely to be asserted as being the speech of the Buddha.
Oh, yeah, tadi chilo, yeah. Chanchu lamchin sunam, tanga se to, chanchu lamchin sunam da. 가서 라나 매베 전주 전부 도지게 네 소남다 시 소니 사고요라 소남다 시 라시 산제지에서 소남다 라나 매베 전주 도베 시도 소남이 소다 시기 소지랑 신이 뒤에서 거라 산제 좀 되게에서 강래 땜베 대신돼서 어디 상만 탈신 받에 대과 신배되는 날 송야래서 네 게랑 대과매 배되는 날 송벌에 하게 로 진솔을 써보 어디서 송야래서 어디 소자 다들 이제는 강래 땜베 대신돼 미시도 대과 신배 너날 때를 송야보다 하마고 semble 공도 취마도 전대에 미동 시럽지 미동네 소소야 무심하도네 또 아니 미시 동남 미스도 대과심배 때는데 사제 가이버도 고저 서트고요 말해서 다 소소 근데 제토면도 삼산데 용식이라 소소 근데 대과심배 나 시천 주스번데 시버심마도나 디 사제 까마르서 용마라 야 디디고 가서다 택배는 배때는 숨벌에 하고 침바다로 저저 꼴에 쏘디오라 딱고 현시바 심지어 탐제 대통령 같은데 삼을 코쳐라 코르메쳐 생겨 말아 근데 삼을 공개지나 내가 지부 조전에 타르토반데 배틀레트니 하고라 그 산제 숨보 마이나네 텔레 하고지 손에 여대 산제 머숨베스를 차도라 티겨레세 통마로 담아도 반도서 그 심지어 탐제 대통령 란르타 집어주도 세발 소바 강가를 줘야 돼. 미닝도 없어야 돼. 타매어라. 강가 삼로 또 치주 찍고 용마라. 근데 닝도 깨지 와르데 닝도 깨면 쳐세요. 뭐 깨시기라. 디디 라조스란데 조스마들 하고데. 하고에는 때 산지가 손에 도와서야 저들이 랩도라. 지야. 되지 람나. this one.
Oh, geez.
Yeah.
So then in the next verse, it says, now in the Tibetan, it is in a slightly different order, but those blinded by ignorance cannot tolerate the universal vehicle in which the Buddha taught the great path consisting of merit and wisdom that leads to awakening. So here, this path that leads to unsurpassed awakening as taught within the universal vehicle scriptures that teaches the complete collection of merit and wisdom. This is sort of superior to what is taught within the fundamental vehicle teachings. And so here, there are those that are sort of blinded by their ignorance and therefore can't tolerate the universal vehicle. They can't understand it, or they are sort of blinded to that. They can't bear with that because they look at the kinds of practices that are explained, the sort of superior generosity and the pursuits of a bodhisattva, and think, oh, well, I can't do that. I wouldn't be able to achieve such a state. And so here, that which is superior to the kinds of teachings that were given in the fundamental vehicle, these kinds of activities of generosity for the benefit of all sentient beings and so forth. When we think about the mental fortitude, the kind of courage that beings can have, it is something that is really boundless, that is infinite. But beings are at different kinds of stages of the path or at different capacities. And so someone who, based upon their own more limited capacities, looks at the universal vehicle and says, oh, well, that's not possible. Therefore, it's not the speech of the Buddha. It's not something that the Buddha taught. This is really due to their being blinded by their own ignorance and not being able to comprehend fully the kind of unsurpassed awakening and the path by which one achieves that.
Oh yeah. 다 가르쳐도 있으나 단들 던져 숨고 거네 지시도 다 당부들이야 수구주 타예베 티진 수구주 타예바 티진래 송바서라 산제지 수구 수구다 수구신이오라 추수지구세시 수구수도 산제 구수 최단계 가서 무슨 통해야 될 수가 추구수도 나로 빵도기 내니부터 추구수라 이시 추구성원이 보자 시제 랑도 윤에 탐지 신경 지마 명무보다 시제 지바 탐지 딱봐 빵봐 빵도 유연이 들으시거라 다단들 수구주 타예바 시티과 시비도나 송을 sti시여서라 수구주 타예바 가시도스나 야 다들 어디라 강본에서 연대 카더 타예베스 연대 카더 타예베 데뷔 연대 되서라 데뷔 타르토 베네거지 교육 연대인데 카더 타예베 오래 교육 연대인데 카더 타예베 주만보지 학버지 사기는 tin 데뷔데 타예베 시용구라 교텔에 박버지 데뷔 용구라 어디 연대 카더 타예베스 네 연대 교육 연대인데 타르토지 내가 교육 연대인데 남간나시 타예바 세메버시요나 수라 타예베 데부 데세네 데부 개외 연대세 개외 연대세 데 개와세 데 개외 연대세 개외 연대 타예 송세 텔테네니 주진델 테네 개와게 산제기 연대데 타예버요레 송버라 에서라 타예 송세 아니 간실 산제 당니치 간실 산제 당니치세 디가르스 벌스나 강게지 산제 당니치부 되겠어라 대신에 시에바데 쇠버리 계시에서 특별 첨배 너값수 생명인 돈을 매번 마무송바데 탑도 시럽기차 마무송 다 시럽기차라시 탑기차 마무송바데 쇠버리 계시에서 대하버데 쇠버지 어때 야무 말을시 꼬마듯이거라 산제 당니치 대신에 시에 들쇠기에서 특별 첨배 돈을 시에바데 쇠버리 계시에서거라 대신에 시에바데 쇠버리 계시바오세 삼지 메자바 지다르 신나서 산제기 교유데 삼지 메자바 간데서데 데뷔데 삼지 메자바 간데요르세나 아닌데 템베 셔리불이야 까체도와 템베 셔리불이야 산제기니 추림기 풍부 라소베 타시에 삼스티레 산제기 추림기 풍부라서 뭔가 막간데 쌓여버다 뜻강가 연대뜻 강가 저랑 타디 신기 도에서 하래 딜레테니 싱미 도시마 시루아 제자 타예바 니랑게 람라 숭발레 하바 예바티 티시게라 티카시 도스나 올레서 뭐데 오데레 파바샤라 타디 비유시기도 아니 추tum 삼야 메시보 산게게 추tum게 연대테 타르 데든 데타부요 딜레라부요 마르시 타 시토그 메시아 시라 어디는 다 연대신다 가면 집어러 와서 등이제다 시럽을 써가가 전날 산제 당니시 삼예 반에 심에서서 산제지 구성도 연대도 가가 삼례야고 상가라서 지다 삼일에 대바 주 삼일에 대바지 사네 대부 삼일에 대바 토바데 가라서 삼부 콘도 심하도 나한테 서버체 고래서 그라 샤라드디 산제지 연대 타여바 다시 추림기 풍부 타서면 메시시아 슈도와 네 산제 당이 친구 연대데 타여바 메시바 데이터부야 이체버를 제라세 어제 젤리아 이시체고래세 주타예베 다데데 그래 주타예베 모두 네 데부타예바 중앙 산제지 연대 타예바 주타예바를 때는 데부테 연대 타예바 근데 여바 뜻이라 주촌이래 대야 속바래 특별 준비 때문에 때문에 예바를 kellang 버죠 다 주촌이 타예바지 사는데 자주 선배가 대산제 산제도 연대 타예바 얘랑 트라좀 벌어서 바트줄라 맹게 연대도 여바데 서버리 계시에서 들 꼬마다스기도 야 어디지라나
So then next is establishing that the great, so here that one establishes that this is the speech of the Buddha based upon knowing that to complete the sort of great being that is a Buddha, one needs these kinds of infinite causes. So here it says the necessity of knowing the complete path of great enlightenment from the great vehicle scriptures. And so here, this then in 384 comes first with the limitless causes of the form body are explained in the great vehicle. So here when we talk about Buddha's bodies, the Dharmakaya, or the truth body, and the form body being that by which a Buddha actually teaches to other disciples, and the Dharmakaya, or the truth body, being comprised of a Buddha's abandonments and realizations. We can also talk about the sort of a nature truth body and the wisdom truth body, the wisdom truth body, including all of the knowledge of what is to be adopted and abandoned, all of those kinds of qualities of realization, as well as the kinds of qualities of the abandonments, of having removed all fault. And so here, as it comes then in verse 384, it says, since a victor comes from merit that is as inconceivable as space, a victor is said to have inconceivable good qualities. Hence, one should accept the greatness of Buddhas as explained in the universal vehicle. So here, when it comes to a victor, again, a Buddha who has inconceivable or sort of infinite qualities, like to the extent of space, when one recognizes that, you can estimate, or you can guess, that the causes leading to such infinite qualities themselves are infinite. The result accords with the vehicle. So, or sorry, the result accords with a kind of cause. And so those many, this final cause of Buddhahood that contains inconceivable infinite qualities is something that in turn came from the development of inconceivable infinite causes. And so therefore one should have sort of patience with respect to this, or bear with the kind of teachings of the great or the universal vehicle, in terms of they teach the method side, the kind of infinite inconceivable qualities that lead to such an inconceivable result in the qualities of a Buddha. And so here, this is something where continuing in to the next verse again, so one should thereby recognizing the kind of infinite qualities of a Buddha, see that there are infinite causes, inconceivable causes that led to such a state. And so here, this is something that is really beyond the scope of our knowledge. Even the extent of a single quality of the Buddha, something like their qualities of meditative stabilization, or here, as it comes in the next verse, the qualities of their collection of ethics, is something that is really beyond the scope of our mind. So we should sort of have patience with this, or bear with this. So it says then in 385, even just the ethical conduct of the Buddha was beyond Shariputra's ken. Why then wouldn't one accept that the greatness of the Buddhas is inconceivable? So when it comes to even knowing a single sort of quality of the Buddha, like for example his ethics, this is something that is infinite, is beyond the sort of realm of our thought. And so here, recognizing that a Buddha is brought about while one is a bodhisattva, one trains in the two collections of merit and wisdom, and those are really infinite. And so infinite causes will result in a result, an effect that is infinite as well, that is the infinite qualities of a Buddha.
Oh yeah, that's all. Look at get to the take by chile, give me dancer. Take by chimney, donally, I give up more the tradition. Tatunda, Yedi Tingita, to the Manchawake, Cheba, Yedi, the Ranget to the Tombani, Umaboshe, Tombani, Tom, the Toma, Sigara. Oh, teaching that's in the Shigra, those are there. Toma tell you, and I should say, Yedu, the Ranget to the Kanga, Pagbelam, the Shudia, Tombani Toko. 동반일이야 타라요 말이냐 되고또에 동반이도 랑게또에 특별시비 전주선 뭐또에 개발요 말 엄마 대적로잖아 아 현대도 약해 봐 다들 지다 마오게 Pile kyan ko kepa chigira, rapa chi shigora. O ti shisha chene. Ti tongpa nye se chi shigidwa se. O ti etene karsere. Yangda bachi mare se ti shigora. O ti li atan len chigidwa. Tikpa chile keme tense. Tikpa chimbe de na le kyawa meba ten ba, kyawa meba sheba se, kyawa meba se ten shigore. Ti tanga se ora. Shenji seba tongpa nye, shen tikpa mebe de kapso. Seba sheba se aro. Tinte chi toye chiware. Tini niti chikpa rese, tongpa nye rese, tanda. Seda meje sheba ne chikpa di chi shibare. Tikpa chimbe kapso, kyawa meba sheba se ta. Tini seba sheba se te. Ta oma tengyo tata na shi chene tini chikpa rese wara. Tongpa nye sheba le chago rese wara. Wate sonda kasere. Chikpa di chi so. Te sonda tikpa chimbe tene nanglia. Tongpa nye tegi sude. Cheda ro shibichi shegi samye te ma rese. Te kera tikpa membe do nanglia she. Nyeran trachumba kumkuya. Te chikpa rese te shega ta. Wate chilana.
So here, then turning to verse 386, and just as a preface to that, here most of the tenant schools of the fundamental vehicle. Now here, this is in contrast to the kind of assertions of the Prasangika school. They don't accept that hearers and solitary realizers, or Shravakas and Pratyeka Buddhas, realize the most subtle emptiness, whereas for the Prasangika school, they would assert that even those who attain the state of an arhat, of a hearer and a solitary realizer, must realize the most subtle emptiness in order to achieve that state. So here, they're, like, for example, the Vaibhashikas would assert something different, but here we are talking about from the perspective of the Prasangikas. And so this next topic deals with this idea of extinction or exhaustion, as it is described in the fundamental vehicle, and the kind of idea of non-production or being unborn, which is described within the Mahayana, the universal vehicle scriptures, is actually, those both are referring to emptiness. So rather than seeing this term, and again, this is according to the Prasangika kind of a view, that extinction that is taught from the fundamental vehicle scriptures has the same meaning. We should know that to have the same meaning as being non-produced, unborn, as is taught in the universal vehicle scriptures. And these are both similarly referring to the meaning of realizing emptiness. And so when we see this kind of extinction, it shouldn't lead us to an understanding that is a kind of nihilistic view, but rather this is something that is referring to that understanding of emptiness.
Oh yeah, that's Captain. Tony Sanje Chawani, the Rebecca Denasa, teaching Jishu lesson ba.
Again, get you got took the dosa get you got took the hasha. Tepa chele kemeten.
Hello, Tindu Jurva. Tipa Yosanda. Tipa Chile Kewa Meba Tembateda. Tipa Meme Dukas of Seba Sheba Shea Nibuti. Chiba Resi, Tonga.
Yeah, no.
Oh, did this one? Oh, yeah. But under the Captain Dira. Only Sanjay Chawani is the Rebecca Dena. Teaching Jishu lesson ba. Keva Namla, Chiminyamse. Oh, Tadi Karsidosana. Tombani Checha Ramji Miba, Tongni Sechi Shegara. Oh, the Sanje Chimbu Chugu Tanging Arsheba Tedar. Rebe Chesutena, teaching Jitene, Chishu Time Jitene Lesumba, Keva Namla, and a Careto. Kayim Bichi Minyam de Nyambe Chusemechi Ori. Tatunda. Tekwa Chembugun daughters, Tekwa Mebe daughters, Sanje Kai, Minyamba rest the Shegdoa. Teta Ribe Chetenas, Ribek Patagi Nase, Chusetus of Patan, sometime in Roa. And then teaching Geshe le songba se tekba chenpo na songba tabda shirabji chata zuda ane tekba membe do na songba tezo sora teaching Geshe le songba tingmen do le songba keba namla chi minyam se te sanje je kayemba de chi minyam de nyamba re se de chi de sanje ka re chi de sanje ka ma re se kirati she tu ma re se rikpe chupchi wa ma re se niga sanje songba de yemba de le rikpe chupchi wa re se tanda tekba membe do nam songba sama songge wa ra tina ne tongba ni tambe chole keba me ra ane ta tabje chade liya tagbe shen cheba se di nga razu simje ringa shile suyo tuku maare te lu chimpa tongwa la sowa tezo ina tezo ko tikpa chenpo ke chanchu simpa yin shinche tala lu chimpa tongwa sangi wa maara lu chimpa tongwa saka tsayla lepso na lu la tsema tabi lo kesi paru komdara chudu sa lu tozo tawa tseme sonre lo mato tse nga ee samsa ke shencha ta tinte yo maara ti yin tozo ko che na nga razu neshi o tangi di samsa ti tsoa di wa marwa. Tinte kabla le so ne chimba tang chogu desi ma do. Nga sasa ne ka li longge chungze samal chimba tang ku marwa. O ti tang ina ni nyanga chimbu yo wara. Chanchu semba ina ya rita. Chanchu semba ina ya ko li chimba tang chola le ne chimba tang chor ma do. Ti mene tang cho marwa. Nga zo ti na do na kasha yu kudwa. Shari budi nima chanchu semba ina do. Chanchu semba she. Tila chigi lakwa yeba de longdwa, lakwa yeba chimbatang roshi. Ko chimbatang ri, lakwa yeba chimbatang. Ta chimbatang de zang kompa tre urwa, lakwa yema de tre re. Ani ko kanda ne tiche de, ta tiche rigra kaya ne mishi. O kyo ngali ya lakwa yema de tre re ase. Kusha mendo ase che ne, ngali ko mendo sinare. Ani chanchu sembati ne tiche re. Chanchu semtang yesikdo. chanchu semtange mambo yongdo te semjenge choba be pa kari mo kari chene kashe be choba ngemba kade ne ko chengde yongora kachi de tuji rikto so ko nyamso ra lantin de chengde yongora kachi de ngonera kande do tangi suru shi tate yora o chende yongdo te soja ko o ya tanda tinde so o te chi labne ya so
So here then sorry, I didn't read the 386 that went with that past section, that the non-arising taught in the universal vehicle and the cessation or extinction, as I've been saying, taught for other Buddhists are both emptiness. Therefore, one should accept that cessation and non-arising are ultimately the same. So there's no sort of distinction there, as is expressed in 387 then, between the kind of subtle emptiness that is taught within the fundamental vehicle scriptures and that of the universal vehicle. So it says, emptiness is the majesty of the awakened one. Reflecting thus with reasoning, how could the wise not maintain that what is said in the universal vehicle and the other are equal? So here, when it comes to the kind of subtle emptiness that is the object of the path, that is taught then within the fundamental vehicle and the universal vehicle, there's no difference between that, a kind of subtle emptiness. It is taught in the same way, although as we saw, using different kinds of speech within the fundamental vehicle as in the universal vehicle. And so therefore, there's not a reason that can establish, well, oh, this one is the Buddha's speech, but this one is not. Now, when it comes to the parts of wisdom and method, as those are taught within the fundamental vehicle versus the universal vehicle, there are a difference. There's no difference in terms of the subtle emptiness that is taught, the wisdom side of that. However, when it comes to the method side, there are distinctions between the kinds of methods that are described within the fundamental vehicle versus the universal vehicle. We see, like, for example, in the universal vehicle, the kinds of teachings in which bodhisattvas engage in generosity, where they are willing to give away their own body. Now, for them, this is not difficult, as they have come to a level in which they are able to regard their own body as sort of like being like giving away vegetables. It's not something that is difficult or that causes them any kind of suffering, because they no longer have this kind of clinging to their own body. So here, when it comes to the method side, developing the ability to engage in such generosity or equalizing and exchanging self and others, this is something where there is a kind of distinction. Now, there is a story about, there are times in which one who is pursuing the bodhisattva path, then because of their mental level, is not able to continue that. Like, for example, Shariputra was said to have been a bodhisattva who have been on the bodhisattva path, and he actually like cut off and offered away his right hand. So then when he was making an offering to another person, and of course there's this kind of a way in which particularly in Indian culture, to offer something with your left hand is seen as being disrespectful, and so he's trying to make an offering, but of course he's already offered away his right hand, so he's not able to give with that, and the person gets kind of like angry, like, what, why did you offer this with your left hand? That's so disrespectful. And he actually ended up giving up his bodhicitta, right? He wasn't able to continue on that path. So we can see that there are differences in terms of the kind of method side, but when it comes to the emptiness, the subtle emptiness that is taught within the fundamental and the universal vehicle, there's not a distinction there. And so why say that, why would you not maintain that what is said in the universal vehicle and the other are not equal or are equal?
Oh yeah, this one. Yeah. Oh, done it. Tishin she gong sungba namse. Tishin she ba sanje chumden de ane nyendo ji tekba ranje ji tekba chimbu su sum sum re se ora. Ane tele pumbu lama mebe nyangele debe ying su na. Ane tatu bara chi sum yora. Tatu tekba sum du debe luna shi chena. Te tatu tekba sum re kaba shune kya me re se re. O tende mara te chandu re se ora. Tishi kasura. Tishin she sumba nam. Tishin she bage tatu tekba sumdu sumba de. Ane kunshi shenla konde sumba de matu de tartu be tekba yene sumba ma re sora. Gomba chengi do res. Gomba chengi do sene samlo tonsa de shenda che kane sunye de shenda che ne gomba chengi do sora. O de shene sunye de tindel gogo res gomba de matu. 자치 신바시네 켈렌 두미로 한텔라 공부하신 도시거라 장등긴 도시 어떤다 어디 이 공부하신 도레스 타도 대바 좀 말해서 타도 대바 찍으래 대바 신부도 타도 버려 마동 예랑이데 타도 버 말해서 와라 송비와라 그 대신 시고 송바남 네 시바 라미 대치르세 산제의 공부 지마치신 가릴 건데 송비도 레라고 말해서 오라 택지 택바 숨숨 배세 택바 지에 송여라 택바 숨에 송여라 어제인데 땅님 때네 다 송샤하세 어제 땅님 때네 다 송샤하세 다들 꼬아다지와 말해서 소소 택바들 송나 가비레서라 디신시베 공디 송바 남시라고 말해 상계 송바 상마등하라저 시라고 말해 공바시한다 시한 때네 송바 마부여라 장등지 도당에 때도 마부여라 요래서 내 택바지도 세바다 터도 택바 숨송바대야 야 심말로 공디 송바 터도 택바지 택바지 송바대 택바 심보도 터도 이 송바대 녀들에서 현다대 녀좀 말해서 장도에서 오라 공부하신도 그래서 내가 년도 따라게도 년도 된 경과 줘봐 타바토버시 지금 메시 증리되고 깔래 때문에 네 토요일에 지요 송샤네 그 깔래 뺏잡시 준비 와라 Kebachita Shana, Ratna Shinsro, Yoyana Beresa, Tambunilla Tanshagra, Kawasam. Tineshita Rasa getting out till louder. Kebachi of Kale Kapuna, Koalichi, Torres Unata, Nevada Song do some Santilla Rangi Kasre, Rangi Kebati Sungura. Tito's young lot of Chera, or Nedetos of Quasura. Kawaji Tonamato, Tarabu Shana, Lo Shumduge. Simshu Chadum Visura, what is the Sungura? What can do Kabandu Sita? Tishin Shebe Kong de Sumba, Sumba Church. Kong de Sumba Yingi, Namala Koa Daban Mesha, Tatu Teba Sum Sumba de Kumba change daughter ese. Negam to say the Letesun Amato, oh, Bill Marikeba Tomisum de Sasane, any trouble de Sunjanako, Lord Sumatum get to the Sungu ese, Koya Dumele Tire top. Dear Combacha ese. Tadu Tibachi to somebody, Tartu with Tibati, Tibachimble Shunamado, Tartu Yomare, Nyandu the Rangi, Tartu Yomares, call it Taramato, Tanda, Sanji Kumato Yomarwa, what is Suda? Sum sung by Chima, Tanyam so sung by Yingi, Yingi, Mamala Goa Daba Meshas, Tadu Tibachi to somebody, Tibachimbe Dodelia, Goa Madase. Madonna Tanyamsu Shala Rani Tanyamsu Shakbaniji Tasmacho. Yabahaku Medona Negab Tanyamsu Shas, Koa Matavse. Rani Sor Chawas, the Canadilla Coatam, the Pete Wachimbusa Yorese. Chaju Simba lumped into what it somebody Sanya Kamarisana. Tikwachimbusa, Tangi Sung, Kagirese, Tanyam Social. Hamakuna. Yanja Yanda Samutan, Yanja Samutan, and Echi. Oh, Samanga Razuneshi, lot of Chipa Marolo, Chachichumabu, Samna. Oh, today, Janju Samba said, today you do a Ketchup, the Ketchup, Samsa, Samukon, whatever the Kennedy Madu. Kua Mata said, Tangi Song, so song number, Tibanga Masasum, Kindis.
So then in 388, it says that here, if one doesn't understand the meaning of the great vehicle, it is right to be sort of equanimous towards it, but not to disparage it or deride it in any way. And so it says here, when the Tathagata stated with a hidden intention, it is not easy to understand. For this reason, there is said to be one vehicle and also three. Therefore, protect yourself by being equanimous. So here, when it comes to, there are teachings in which we hear about the Shravaka vehicle and the Pratyeka Buddha vehicle and the Bodhisattva vehicle. And these are, according to some schools, taught as three final vehicles. But the teaching of three vehicles is really one that is provisional or that requires interpretation. It was taught with a particular intention, but it is the case that the teachings that state that there is one final vehicle, the Bodhisattva vehicle, that is something that is definitive. So these others teaching three final vehicles is done for a reason. It is done with a particular sort of hidden intention or an intention that is such that we can't take that literally and say that the Buddha taught that there are actually three final vehicles, that once someone has attained the state of an arhat, of a hearer or a solitary realizer, they won't proceed beyond that. But rather, one should understand that that was taught for a particular purpose. So here, when it says then that there is said to be one vehicle and also three, the also three vehicles, teaching those three final vehicles, is something that requires interpretation based upon there being a particular intent behind that, rather than taking it to be something that is the actual sort of definitive teaching. So so here, if one is unable to understand that, this is something where you should sort of place it in a state of equanimity, not disparage that. We can't say that this is not actually the teaching of the Buddha, or we can't say that this is something that we can't take as being definitive. There are those that require interpretation. And so there is a reason why the Buddha taught the Shravaka vehicle and the Pratyeka Buddha vehicle and that of the Bodhisattva, because of the different sort of scopes of mental strength or courage of various disciples. There are those who want to attain liberation quite quickly. Those on the Shravaka path are really intent upon quickly attaining their own liberation. They don't have the kind of mental fortitude or courage to be able to pursue the path of a bodhisattva, hearing like, oh, having to train for 3 countless eons, that would cause them to turn away entirely. They sort of feel like, how could Buddhahood be possible? So in their case, teaching that there's a way to attain liberation within 3 lifetimes is something that is beneficial to them. And so too, there are those that have maybe a little bit more mental strength, and the the Pratyeka Buddhas who are able to pursue the path to their own liberation for a bit longer. But the thought of the needing to benefit all sentient beings, or the sort of scope of the Bodhisattva vehicle, is beyond them, beyond their mental strength. And if they were taught that right from the beginning, it would cause them to get discouraged, to give up on the path altogether. So these various vehicles are taught for a kind of temporary purpose. If someone is able to proceed to that state of liberation, well, then they can continue beyond that. But because of their limited kind of courage or mental strength, that is something that they can't be taught right from the beginning. So if we are in a position where we can't really understand how we ourselves would pursue that particular path, we still shouldn't disparage it or say like, oh, that's not actually the teaching of the Buddha, but rather hold it in a kind of place of equanimity due to the various scopes of mental strength, amounts of courage that various beings have. The Buddha has taught these various paths in order that they have a way to pursue something that accords with their mind. So one shouldn't disparage any of those. It says here in the last line, protect yourself by being equanimous. Even if we can't fully understand the sort of intent of the Buddha or the scope of the practices of a particular vehicle, we should protect ourselves. It would be very non-virtuous to disparage, to deride those teachings of the Buddha, and to say, oh, that's not the speech of the Buddha, but rather we should, even if we aren't able to understand it, hold it in a place of equanimity.
뭐야? 뭐 다때려나? 바카스도 땅님께 dig미 요르세. 땅님께 dig미 요르세. 태좀 마셔야 돼. 말에서 근데 태좀 사네. 꼬마다 버서라. 땅님께 dig미 요르서 땅님서 샤샤나. 소소하고 말로 치우면은 더 샤샤니 땅님세. 맞아 단다 신다 신데시도 교황아치 요래요 말했으나 단다 티고는 삼루땅 매세 하고 매세스나 따로 티고 삼루땅 매세도 같이 뛰어오더와 매세 다 제지요 말와 매도 코나 그게 말이나 매뱅이 보여 말와 랑게 마시나 마토나 매뱅이 보여 말와 믹세브면에 또 쳐주도 통매도 맞아 믹세브면에 이게 쳐주도 통매도 이제 그 소소마동네 매뱅이밖에 요 말이지. 소소마동의 주제도 전에 매슬람나네 년가 친구라. 님만아주 다이셔. 뭐다. 어디지 가서. 따님께네 딩미 요르세. 택바 친구도데 전주 선바진데 세때 야부 말을 산제까 말에세. 데 진데시 고아담나니 티바 요라. 다 샤샤나와티 메시컨데 나틴데 셰도 티컨데 나타당에 야부지 다에마 중스 샤샤네 야시도가 택바 친구인데다 상하인데다 뒤제때다 텔레텐데 카실리아티 베야 kapsupabatende 용거라 상말라 kap수바뱅에바 요마라 티카리나 메신사라체 샤샤네 야시데스라 따님 게네 딕미 요르스 따님 소샤나 Tekpa Chimbo de Sanje Ka, Dodo Sanje Ka in the Messiada, or Tezuka Tanyam Sushashana Yawure, Keran Kemalna. Mare Silana, Tachindo Koshena, Tekpa Sagamato, Tachueke Omara. Tanyam Jenny Dig Major, Taya Tingur Kemajor. Oh, Tekpa Chimbo to Tamacho, Tekpa Chimbo to Sanje Kamara, Chu the Yantama Mara Logwa, Lamna Ko Chu the Yantama in the Logwa, Yimba Ko Toast the Hakura. Miller sawa chigido wa sawa pangido pemba chugido wa sene kunlu tana ne kunlu kewa yene kewa rawa kunlu nyamba chigi samu tana kari na sando kauche na ko tiro mi kewa regira sosu tandari samu tana chi miliyan gogo tana chima chi chego samna ti pata di indo kauche gira pendo kauche pensim chiwa chigo gira tanda mi kewa regira kunlu chita muche ko kunlu rale gira tanga chena ting gyuru se keri meju tele ke hoyo mare se tsu shasha ne kera tegwa chenbu yabu ha ko mendo nego shasha se samdai se ani tebe teaching she dangwa tagle debe char mere stadara tene teachpa chenbu tenelya ko ata tezu sanje che mare yang ta mare se ko ata vete se ora teaching she dang she 아니 달에 되베 잘메세 달에서 되베 소소소소 야부 용이 되나 저다 티바 마사스 거랬다 달에서 되베세 소소 야부 영아 아 또고 되게 야부 그 삼게 가사였나 계란티 뭐 마타스 거래 달에서 되베나 다 대wan 되베나 티고 마도 티고 담네 티고 심사 그래서 했던더라 달에 되베 참미레사 Tan de balo ko ma de de to. De so.
Oh, Jisung.
Ya.
So here, continuing with this same idea, by being in 389, by being equanimous, you do nothing wrong, but negativity comes from anger. How could virtue? Hence, those who seek what is good for themselves should not despise the universal vehicle. So here, even if we're unable to understand all of it, we shouldn't despise or disparage the universal vehicle, but should rather hold in a place of kind of equanimity. So this is the same with like whether or not there are past and future lives. If we have some kind of doubt about that, we shouldn't just immediately conclude, oh, well, there are no past and future lives and jump to that kind of conclusion. But rather, if we're uncertain, sort of place our minds in a place of equanimity. Maybe there are, maybe there aren't. And we can investigate and try to determine that. But just because we can't see it ourselves doesn't mean that we can say definitively there are no past and future lives. Like, for example, just because the sort of ability of our eyes is such that we can't see atoms, we can't say, oh, well, atoms don't exist because I don't see them clearly. Or if we have a bad eyesight and there are small letters and we say, oh, well, those don't exist because I can't see that. That isn't logically correct. And so here to say that, oh, well, this isn't the speech of the Buddha because I don't see how it could be that way. This is something that we should be extremely cautious with respect to. So to have a kind of state of equanimity wherein you don't come down on one side or the other, then you're not doing anything wrong there. But if you have a kind of sense of anger toward it, animosity toward that, then there is negativity that comes from that. So here, whether it is something like the universal vehicle or the secret mantrayana, if we look at them and say, oh, well, that's not the speech of the Buddha, I don't think that's the speech of the Buddha, we can't say that definitively, but doing so is going to incur a great non-virtue, saying, oh, that's wrong or that's incorrect, I don't know how that could be something that was taught by the Buddha, then this is something that will just bring about bad results, that will result in negativity, and isn't going to do anything that is helpful or positive. So here, when it comes to we want to have a good for ourselves. And if we do things that in the pursuit of our own aims is like cheating others, again, what comes about from that is determined by our kind of intention. If we have an intention to cause harm, like say in despising or disparaging the universal vehicle, that is going to lead to a bad result, just as in the same way that when we have a desire for our own aims alone and we cheat others and do things that are harmful to them, that is going to result in something bad. If we can't determine definitively that something is or is not the speech of the Buddha, then for now just hold it in a place that is sort of equanimity. If you want good for yourself and want to not hurt yourself, then here you should be particularly cautious with respect to having kind of animosity or hatred for the universal vehicle simply because you don't fully understand it.
Oh yeah, that didn't mind this year to a sort. How do so? Oh, it is. Sumba Timeji, Timeji, Tenele Shebe, Teba, Chimbu Lamde Soba. Timeji, Tenele Sheba, Tezu Samal Tana, Teba Chimbu Lamdan Drebu, Tabshi Sama de Sanyo Mares, Tatele Lava teaching of Sora. Diego Logo Tenzen Sumjen Shegdwa. Ah, Tambu de Tambu de Garesena. No. Niente che tendele Shanju sembe cheba sogwa ma sungwa se tambu dira niente tende nalia sungwa de sama tekwa chimbe tende na sungwa de sama sungyo ma re sera niente tendela Shanju sembe cheba sogwa ma sungwa re tate shedwa te kare sena niente tekwa tele ne serwa niente je tekwa tele ne se niente je ya lam chuzu shebe niente je tende tele sungwa ra niente tekwa tele ne se Niente che tenere semato, rangi che tenere solo io marati. Devi tenere tava rangi tenere mezzo, rangi tenere solo io mara. Che teme tenere le se tenda. Niente te tele ne chanju simbe malam dase. Sheba yon niente che tebe dote tesunalia, teme donalia. Chanju simbe malam seme bacha yorwa. O tesu kanga yo mare se vera. Shimba chanchu sembe malamdang. Cheba yongo se. Cheba chanchu sembe cheba shanki tendu cheba cheba sama. Ta go chimba tama la soba da te sembe tingmelia mege mabu yora. Shen so shenja. O tende mabu yore sera. Chanchu sembe malamda. Cheba yongo so ngoa chide. Semje tamze tendu se. Semje chanchu semba ge ngoa de semje tamze tendu se ngoa shade. 심지어 레레를 침바당 왔지나 심지어 탐제에 던도 침바당 왔지 누구야라 벨럽 침부 소사기야라 되게 가서 전주 선배 말람 다서 제바 ngoa 마부체로 겨와 ngoa 제데 택바 신변하려 소소 겨와서 샤바디 생기 던도 방ngoa 전에 펜도 용토 했는데 용거라 말람 잘했어요 이렇게 되시죠 어떻게 그러면 돈을 쉐어 말해서 ngoa 말람 전주 선배 계획 수가가 그러니까 제바 영어 마셔야 되지 말람다 전주 선배 제바다 ngoala 소바 영어 마셔야 되지 전주 선배 Garland Yuruse. Oh, the teammate and not to share Martit. Chanju Sibet and that Chibari or Marese, Chanju teammate and a Marsha Mabuchi teaching Chanju Sibet and La Shea or Rese. Did not share you and they can get in all your Marese and Dara. Oh, I think Garland Yurus. Yeah, Digmados. Develop this one.
Yeah, do song again. So here, then the next section deals with the kind of incompleteness of the paths and the fruit of the universal vehicle as it is explained in the fundamental vehicle. So here it says in 390, the Bodhisattva's aspirational prayers are not taught in the hearer vehicle. And here where it says hearer vehicle, we should understand that as being the fundamental vehicle. There's no separate solitary realizer kind of collection of scriptures. And so the Bodhisattva's aspirational prayers are not taught in the hearer vehicle, nor are there practices, nor the dedication of merit. How could one become a Bodhisattva through that vehicle? So the complete methods for pursuing the Bodhisattva path are not taught in the fundamental vehicle. The kinds of limitless prayers, immeasurable prayers that Bodhisattvas make, and the kinds of practices that they engage in, the level of generosity of being able to give away even one's own body, one's own head, and so forth. The sort of aspirational prayers that they make for the benefit of all sentient beings, as well as the dedications that they engage in. When one engages in, for example, an act of generosity towards just a single being, but with the aspiration and the kind of dedication that go toward the benefit of all sentient beings without exception, that becomes something that is incredibly powerful as a result of those powerful, immeasurable sorts of aspirational prayers and dedications. So those kinds of practices, prayers, and dedications are not taught in the fundamental vehicle. Again, where it says here vehicle, that includes the that of the solitary realizer as well. And so when it comes to the kinds of teachings that are given within the fundamental vehicle, by pursuing those alone, how could one become a bodhisattva through that? But rather the main sort of practices, including the aspirational prayers and the dedications that are made by bodhisattvas, are only taught in the universal vehicle.
뭐야? 다들 다들 도박고도 주 도박거는 가시르스는 태반 멤버 때는 내가 태반 숨게람 쉐어로 와서라 되게 때문에 주신 것이 저서 계속도 연구로 소요라 지단데 주요래서 태반 멤버 때는 내가 태반 숨게람 쉐베서 년도다 라게다 태반 숨비어서 람든 소요돼서라 쉐베 지셔 택바 전부 마사시 그런 택바 택매 되는 도중에 택바 전부도 나 쉐베 연대 탑식 연대 그 상황도 쓰시거라 택매 도나래 택바 전부다 이는 년도 택바랑 택바 산지 전주선배 택바 신고도 와서 그 쉐도 와서 마사시 가르세레스 조티도 택바 멤버 되는 택바 전부람 소바 산지지 마셔서 택바 멤버 되는 날이야 탑식이 남 저거한테 산지를 써요 말이셔라 마셔대 년도 남라 리시 마템베 년도 도저래야 리시 또 단도 내거는 같을이야 그때변도 들어요 말이었어 거라 또 그런 녀모도 저방 지과 가진셔서 로도 처를 들어서네 내가 침불이야 뒤에 뒤셔거라 전에다도 여기 엄마데서 단다들라 람고모 쪼그래서 마오바나 소나 로톱 수르와 단다 알레 코에 동에 코라나네 가라텔레 타나 마도서 삼르드 슈 치다르 쳔네 쳔다 마부셰서 요마라 내가 그런 거 마소레세 년도 남라 리시 마데 베셔르스 어디르 다들 베고도 어디지 람나 되기도 담보
So here then in the next verse 391, again this is based upon a kind of qualm that arises. Here it says then that again from the fundamental vehicle scriptures we see explanations of the three vehicles, and so here why is it that you say that those are not sort of complete within the fundamental vehicle scriptures. So here, what has been asserted is that, again, all of the kinds of qualities and practices and so forth that are contained within the universal vehicle are not taught within the fundamental vehicle. And so as for why it is not complete, then here it answers this in verse 391, wherein it says, in the other vehicles, the Buddha did not state the foundation for the Bodhisattva's awakening. What source is better than the victors for attaining valid knowledge on this topic? So here, the reason why these teachings, the sort of methods and qualities are not complete within those texts of the fundamental vehicle is because temporarily there are certain beings who are not suitable disciples to be led on that path, but rather recognizing their own sort of situation, being afflicted by suffering within samsara, they solely strive for their own liberation. They only have that thought of wanting to get out for themselves. And so temporarily they are not a suitable disciple for the complete path. And thereby, within that fundamental vehicle, the Buddha did not teach exhaustively all of the kinds of methods and qualities that pertain to a bodhisattva's awakening.
야, 더 벌써 다들. 다들 가시도서는 장주 선배 장주 치르시도 장주 선배 장주 치르세. 네 진럽 상계 있기 마셔세. 던데라네 자발에 사괴 참아 신수유세. 들으셔. 다 돈다 가르쳐도서는 대한 장주 선발라나 매베 장주 지치도 진기 라바 임베셔세. 장주 선배시라 라나 매베 장주 지치도 진기 라바 임베셔세. 특별 침베되는 손데 장주 선배도 특별 침베 람리아 슈네 람 고야다 때려라 진기 라바레 서시기라. 진기 라바스도 때려 규로아들서라. 규로다야. 삼방에 바치는 최선의 삼바삼부 kunsono ne chingi la chögi chinlab jogora nganzo lamme chinlab jogbo sho chögi chinlab jogbo sho sedo chingi la sedo da ko gyuran doyada chö nyene semle gyondo so ne chinlab jogora chö nye karchana kage gyondo gumedo na sanje ge chinlab jogo mare chögi chinlab jogo kage chinlab jogo mare nye je kale kar ngrazo nganzo chö nye de tindore chögdo 야, 나도 스테 걸레스 알고. 시험고시. 신랍상계 김마셰스라. 아니, 땅마들 걸어서. 장주 선배 장주 선배 때문에 가서 장주 때 라나메베 장주 도버샤베 치도 상계지 신일람데 나를 송요라. 야, 이나 때나려. 대부분 멤버다 때저가서 자산 송요 말해서라. 상계 김마셰. 전del라네 자발에 Lagwe Samashem, they call Sanje Chumde, the Sulikarishe me. Or did some Sanje Chingir Madon as a sing Marwa. Sanje to come to Samba Pala and Chita was in the Chingiza. Take Kala content the room, Kala content to Mirwade. Sanje Chingir Mado, Tele was fishing Maris at Andara. Or did the Dumado, Tia Chajus and Balana Mebe Chajuki, Shitu Chingi, Lava in Bechershire. Tendila. Tanyendo Daranje to the table chimbola, Shuya Chingila, to the permanent Chelo Jutu Mara. Tendilana Chavala Lagos Chamas, Shamebe, you are teaching it in the Pampa Mecha, or teaching the net Chanju Sambala Song or in Yando, the Ranjaka Subana Tikora, Sumbekos Papa, the Mava, Chingila, Ramba, the Meramba, the Chavore, Tigma Sumba, Sarah. This one.
So here, again, with respect to this verse 391, where it says, in other vehicles, the Buddhas did not state the foundation for the Bodhisattva's awakening. So here, when it says the Buddhas did not state the foundation for the Bodhisattva's awakening, here it actually in this verse has the kind of word that we normally translate as blessings, the sort of blessings or that which creates transformation, we should say. When we talk about a kind of a blessing, this is really, often people think that it's just something that they receive, but this is really what transforms or changes our mind. And so they did not teach then in the fundamental vehicle all of the kinds of sort of blessings or that which would create a transformation for everyone because of the fact, again, that the Buddha alone is one that has knowledge, complete knowledge of the various kinds of inclinations, dispositions, habits, desires of sentient beings. And if they are not suitable recipients for that teaching, then the Buddha is not going to teach that to them. So in those teachings for the other vehicle, the Buddha did not state the sort of foundation or those kinds of blessings that lead to a bodhisattva's awakening, as in it wouldn't be something that would actually bless or transform the minds of those particular disciples. And we know that there is no one sort of superior to the Buddha or the victors as a source of valid knowledge on this topic. And so recognizing that, one should not abandon then the scriptures of the universal vehicle. Again, given that we don't have the kind of knowledge of what is suitable for whom, we shouldn't look at the universal vehicle and say that it is not the speech of the Buddha.
Kabalesa soloka kabalesa.
Gupchogoni.
Oh yeah. Near the lagwa ya truth.
Just have to find the verse again. When you touch the wrong thing, then we go to the wrong spot.
Oh yeah, kubjikonira. Oh did. Yeah. Tachene kharidasina. Taniba nese. Dadimogosh. Pagbe demba. Shida shoten sudenbo. Keba tameba sumdo kombe. Sanje sanjoroshan. Takajiya. Tiwakudoa. Oh, the Pagbe Dembashi, near the Tendil Solar, Vasura, Pagbe Dembashi. And it's Chanjo Sudus, Chanjo Sudus, some Sudus Chajara, Jambanyor Shabashi, Santabuashi, Sudu Kambashi, Ombunga Tonga said Yore, that some Sudus Tadayora, Parliament like Yeshe. Or Tezukanga Timid Sonora, or Tisunda Pagbe Dembash, Shida, Chanjo Sudun, some. Keba Trambe sum do kombe Sanje Tobar Juroshinas. O te Nedu Tenia Timeji Tenalia, Tembashi Corso Yora, Te Tarwa Topto Yora, Te Lamdelia, Tembanyor Shabashi, Yandapoashi, La Sopa, Suduji Kambashi, Ombongatom, Tate Trangajama, my communication. Ombongatom, Sajon, Pala in Chess, the Trangaja, Sum Sub de Yora, Chancho Subdusera. Oh, Titi Keba Mambu Komshana, San Jagirwani, City membership, and of some Guamendo, some Yora. Shina answer, I thought tell like Yora. Yeah, I'll let teach you Lamshana. Tuade.
Yeah. So here then coming in verse 392, it says really the topic is that Buddhahood cannot be achieved through practicing just the four noble truths and the auxiliaries to enlightenment. So here the kind of a question arises, well, is it possible to obtain Buddhahood through meditating for just three countless eons on just the Four Noble Truths and the 37 auxiliaries to enlightenment? And we won't get through, sometimes they're called the 37 factors of enlightenment. So the four recollections, the four correct renunciations, the four stages of miraculous ability, the five faculties, the five powers, and so forth, all the way the seven branches of enlightenment, and then the eightfold path. is it not possible to attain Buddhahood through just meditating on those? This is the kind of question that is posed, that you would just meditate for a longer period of time, 3 countless eons, on those particular the Four Noble Truths and those 37 factors of enlightenment as they are taught in the fundamental vehicle.
Oh yeah. Mo totally land you, land you, Tempeshita. Yeah, this are the oh yeah. That is a sense, and it is Shashana.
No. Lemma gyamngela. So, yeah. I think we are going to leave it there. We will get the answer next time, I guess. We have just sort of posed the question, but then we will pick up again with 392.
Thank you for blessing our mind with these beautiful teachings this morning, Genla. And thank you, Katrina, for your beautiful translations. We'll finish with some dedication prayers now.
May the spiritual teachers lead me on the sacred path, and the spiritual friends who practice it have long life. May I pacify completely all outer and inner hindrances. Grant such inspiration, I pray. May the lives of the venerable spiritual mentors be stable, and their virtuous actions spread in the 10 directions. May the light of the sun's teachings dispelling the darkness of the beings in the 3 worlds always increase. Iram Guru Mandavakam Nirtayami. Due to this merit, may we soon attain the awakened state of Guru Buddha, that we may be able to liberate all sentient beings from their sufferings. May the precious Bodhi mind, not yet born, arise and grow. May that born have no decline, but increase forevermore.
Oh yeah.
Dinjo Jema Jeyongen.
Yeah. This way.
Recording stop.